I mean, I hope what happened is it did an overview, kind of an overview integration of the integration, and then now it's going deeper into the weeds. And we'll see what it comes up with. And once again, people, feel free to come up on stage, even if you just want to have a casual conversation. This is vibe coding, after all. We can't just be coding, we have to be vibing too. Maybe next time I'll figure out how to have my synthesizer hooked up to the audio input beside me, so I can fiddle around with it while I wait for Claude to do my work for me. Hello, hello. We are? Who are we streaming to? People of Earth. So we have a second document that Claude has generated. This one is definitely way more detailed. I'll send it as well. Can't speak for the accuracy of it. But in fact, let me take a look. Let me take a closer look. I should know this stuff. Use Waku hook structure. Yeah, so use Waku is a React hook, and that's one of the main ways that React applications, at least these days, manage state. It looks like there's an instance of a Waku light node that's stored in the state. Track whether it's starting, track if there's an error, connection status, peer count. I believe that's how we update the UI, or how we check if, we might want more peers. And then we have this Waku file message array, which I think this is specific to the application, so it'll explain it later. And then these refs for cleanup. Then we define a protobuf schema for file messages. So another very, very common pattern you're going to see in all Waku applications is you're probably going to have a data structure for your application defined in protobuf. In this case, there's a timestamp, sender, file name, file size, file type, file ID, whether it's encrypted or not, and if it is encrypted using Taco, what is the access condition? And then here, this root, I think what it basically does is creates a protobuf file programmatically and then adds a definition to it. So if you wanted to have multiple protobuf message types, you can keep adding them to that same root file, I believe. Yes. People of Earth. People of Earth, we are vibe coding. Yeah, so we're vibe coding using Claude Code, and what we're doing is I'm having it examine and take notes on an application that was developed by Guru. I believe he uses Hacky Guru as his handle on most platforms. Guru is the developer relations lead for Codex, and he built something called CipherShare. CipherShare is an application that uses Waku and Codex for peer-to-peer file sharing rooms. Share the link to it, to the repository, and to the live application is in the stage chat. I don't know if you can share it on the direct link on YouTube and X and whatnot. But what we are doing is we're going through that code and seeing how he implemented Waku and Codex, and I want to use that to create a simpler template that I can then use, or that anyone can use, and especially if Claude can use, or any LLM can use, to build a application that uses both Waku and Codex. So what's happening right now is this is Claude making notes, building up a knowledge base to understand like how the project and the code is structured. So what I asked it to do is to first identify all the ways that it's using and integrating with Waku. So here it identified, here's the message sending pattern. Here's how we send messages. Probably double check if to make sure it's not hallucinating, but I'll do that right after. But it looks pretty, I mean, based on my experience working with JS Waku, it looks pretty correct. Typically, when you want to send a message, you have this Waku file message, which it's the protobuf definition that we were looking at earlier. So in almost every single Waku application, you want to send a message, you want to define it in protobuf, though you don't have to. Technically, the encoding can be whatever you want, as long as, you know, all the clients and know what the proper way to encode and decode. We stick to protobuf because this is what the Waku protocol already uses. So yeah, you define a protobuf type, you define a content topic you're going to use. Sometimes, you know, you can parameterize content topics. So in this case, the room ID is used to have distinct content topics for each room. This is another common pattern. And we have to encode the protobuf message into a binary payload, and then that is what gets passed to the light push component of the light node, and you call send. You specify the encoder that you're using, and then you specify a payload, and it will push, or at least attempt to push, the message to any connected peers that support the light push protocol. On the message receiving side, we have to set up these subscriptions. So instead of a encoder, you create a decoder. Also, for a specific content topic, you start the subscription, or rather, you create the subscription object, then you create your callback function. So what do you do every time you detect a message for this content topic? And what you do is, in this case, we check if there's a payload. If not, we return because it's an empty message. We can't do anything with it, at least for the context of this application. Then we attempt to decode the payload into our application's expected protobuf type. And once we have that message, then here it performs some further application level filtering. So in this case, we don't want messages that we sent, or rather, we don't want to process messages that we had sent with this set messages function, which I'm assuming updates the state where we had an array of these messages. So it appends the new message to the state. Yay, functional programming. After all that's defined, we actually start the subscription, you specify a decoder, you specify the callback, and then you return an unsubscribe function. I believe that's the ref that we looked at earlier. And then peer monitoring, I'm going to skip over this, but it basically, from what it looks like, it periodically checks the number of libp2p connections we have and uses that to gauge whether or not we can consider our node to be online. And so if it detects that there's 0 peers and the connection status is set as connected, that's application specific, so I'm not sure exactly what that's about, but specifically here, if we detect that there's no peers, try to reconnect to a peer. We're planning to, and are actively right now, in fact, working on abstracting this away in JS Waku so that standard stuff like peer monitoring is something that the developer doesn't really need to think about if it's not critical. Basically provide like a sane working default as part of our API. Context provider, this is React stuff. I'm going to skip over it. Error handling, Bootstrap node. So I think these are the cluster 42 nodes. So Bootstrap nodes is just that for any peer-to-peer application, any peer-to-peer protocol, you typically need to start with, you need to know who am I dialing first to at least get started building my peer store on this network. So that's typically what the Bootstrap nodes are used for. And similarly, like I mentioned, we want to provide some good defaults for this. Key implementation notes. We use random UUID for generating unique sender IDs, content topics. Yep, all bunch of stuff we went over. Good overview here. Waku is used for peer-to-peer messaging to coordinate file sharing, not for transferring the files themselves, which is, you could tell that whoever built this application knows how to actually use Waku. It's meant more for signaling than it is for actual file storage. The files themselves are stored in Codex, while Waku broadcasts metadata about uploaded files. Excellent. Room-based isolation, which is accomplished using different content topics or parameterized content topics. Light node protocol. Almost always we're using light node in the browser. Technically, we do have a relay implementation of JS Waku, but we do not recommend using that in the browser. Protobuf serialization, custom Bootstrap nodes on cluster 42. Okay, so any questions so far? If anyone comes up with a question in the meantime, I am going to write the next step, which is now generate 2 documents using the same structure, but for Codex integration. Investigate in the same exact way you did for Waku, but focus on how the application integrates with Codex. Don't worry about Taco. So I'm pretty happy with this result. And I think I was able to get this kind of a result because it was very specific about the initial setup. I was very specific about what I wanted it to do, and I kept the scope uh relatively small, but still wide enough that like this is useful for me, and I'm hoping that it will be useful for others as well. Um, so let's see what it does with Codex, and this will be a lot more interesting because I'm not as familiar with Codex, so it may be a little harder for me to gauge the accuracy. But I trust that if Guru implemented it correctly, and if Claude is able to read it correctly, then once I get the report from Claude, I should be able to much better have a much better understanding of how to work with Codex in the in a browser application specifically. So while it does that, why don't I actually find the repository for the library, which I believe is Codex.js. We have a question from Zav. Can two Waku nodes process the same message if they both subscribe to the same topic? Yes. Not only can, but they will. Assuming like they're connected, like they will process the same message. Question from Fiber Liber or Fiber Liber. I know the first word to me looks like fiber. The second one looks like a Latin word. Isn't storing files on Codex a partially centralization element? How about in the direction of torrent-like file exchange? Actually, so they one of the milestones that the Codex team is hoping to hit is to make Codex work as efficiently as a torrent client for torrents. Like BitTorrent over Codex is a non-trivial effort that the team has been working towards. And I'm not sure what would be the centralized element in this case. I think the main point of centralization is the fact that I'm not going to run a local Codex node. I'm going to connect to a remote Codex node. But technically, if I ran the node locally, then there wouldn't really be a centralized point of failure from what I can gather. Okay, so Zav, you have a follow-up to your earlier question. So the first question was, can two Waku nodes process the same message if they both subscribe to the same topic? And the follow-up question is, how can a developer ensure that the work is only done once? Well, for most peer-to-peer applications, the work is duplicated across every peer. So the developer, each client will have to, typically each client is responsible for validating and deriving the correct state based on the messages in the content topic. Because you got to remember that anyone can post anything to any content topic as long as they have a node on the same shard, and as long as they know what that content topic is. So one of the most basic checks that an application will do is, it defines the protobuf definition. So we had it earlier. Okay, I don't think I can pull it up right now. But basically, so we have like a defined protobuf structure, and if you receive a message and you're unable to decode it into that protobuf, then I mean you can probably throw that. I mean you can't do anything with that message, right? It doesn't decode in the in the format you expected it to be decoded into, so you throw it away. Duplicates, that's another thing that probably is the responsibility of the application developer. Whether a message is valid or not, that's also valid in terms of, so I guess, like, okay, let's say you have a message, it properly decodes to protobuf, it's the format you expect it in, but it violates some rule of the application business logic. Each client in this case is actually responsible for enforcing that and for detecting that. This is one of the main constraints of decentralized peer-to-peer applications. Is this where a blockchain like Nomos come into play to ensure that a task is only done once by checking a value in a contract? I mean, it depends what you mean by task. So typically, typically for dApps, shared trustless business logic goes onto the smart contract side, but then you have all these other technical requirements, all this data that doesn't need to be on chain that you probably don't want to be on chain. So, for example, signaling, gathering signatures for a multi-sig, anything like that. Basically, every component of a decentralized application that you don't need on chain, you could use Waku and Codex to implement those solutions. But beyond that, it really is context dependent. I hope that that answers your question. Awesome. The response was yes for people tuning in. I answered the question effectively, and I hope everyone else agrees. Okay, so we got the latest report from Claude now on Codex. So let's see what it told us. We have, I think this is the more detailed report. Codex code patterns. We do Control E. Okay, and here's the overview. And I'll copy that into the Discord chat as well. Share, I don't know if you're able to forward any of these files to YouTube and or X. Maybe if you have the bandwidth, you can drop them into like HackMD or something. Okay, so there's the Codex integration guide. Let's actually read it. Awesome, thank you so much. Reference implementation uses Codex as a decentralized storage layer for file storage and retrieval. Unlike traditional centralized storage, boo, Codex provides distributed content address storage, yay, where files are identified by their content hash, CID. What are the core Codex components? One, an API proxy. What is this? So it looks like there's a Next.js API route as a proxy to the Codex API. Interesting. Handles authentication for remote Codex instances. Forwards requests to the configured Codex endpoint. It supports both local and remote Codex nodes. Yeah, so this is I guess this is a centralized point because you need to host this API route on a server, unless there's a way where it's just like used locally by the application. I'm not like the biggest expert on Next, so I'm not sure, but it seems like this is a hosted endpoint. Handles authentication for remote codex instances. I'm not sure what this means either. I'll have to look into that. Forwards requested a configured codex endpoint. So that makes sense. It's like using a remote RPC for, accessing an EVM chain. Supports both local and remote codex nodes. Cool. So if we technically, like, even with the application that's hosted on that the guru has hosted on his website, you can actually specify if you run a node locally, and then you can tell it, hey, instead of using the remote node, look at localhost 8080 or whatever, and it'll use your remote node. So I guess there is a way. If it uses a remote, or sorry, if it uses your local node, then I think it can't be a hosted endpoint, but we'll look at that closely later. The use Codex hook. So similarly that we have a use Waku hook, there's also a use Codex hook for building the React application. Codex client instance, similar to the light client for Waku, provides file upload download functionality, monitors node status, similarly to the Waku, handles configuration switching. So I'm starting to think that there's a lot of shared logic for both the Codex client and the Waku client. Key functions: upload file, download file, get node info, check status. Beautiful. Codex context provides global codex state management. So this is more React state configuration. We have environment variables. So there's this Codex remote API URL. So this is like the main centralized point of failure in this current application, but it provides an option to switch to local first if you have a local Codex node running, which is beautiful. Right, so local mode, direct connection, remote mode, proxy through Next.js API. Not ideal, but sometimes you have to make this compromise for a better user experience, but it's okay because the application provides a path to making your experience more decentralized. File upload, it looks like it's just the post to an endpoint. Make the content type an octet stream, and then the body is just the binary file, and in response it gives you a CID that you can use to grab that file off the Codex network. Beautiful. There's also, I can't tell if this is grabbing the metadata or setting the metadata. Typically with post, I feel like it's when you're setting metadata, but I'm not sure what metadata Codex uses anyways, or if this is application-specific metadata. File download, get request, specify the CID, gives us a binary stream. Status endpoint, integration. So create the client, make sure it's up and running, just like with Waku. But then instead of sending light push, we just push a file. Optional encryption, we're going to ignore that. So accepts the file through the browser input, uploads it using the API, gets the CID, and then shares the CID via Waku message. Beautiful. As it correctly identified earlier, Waku is not used for file storage. It's used for broadcasting metadata related to file storage. So anyone who is subscribed to the content topic used for this room would see the CID broadcast over Waku and use the CID to get the full file. Right, as it says it here. UI components. I mean, it seems legit to me. and it's showing me that the developer interface for Codex is pretty simple once you have it up and running. It's just you either you upload a file or you download a file. I don't know what else you could want. Now let's dig into the details. So let me copy this detailed report. We have a comment here. Looks similar to IPFS, except exchanging metadata through Waku, username, password auth, also looks a bit centralized. Is it possible to authenticate using Web3 style? The application asks me to connect my MetaMask or Phantom wallet, so I don't think it's using the username password auth unless the username password auth is you mean for the Codex API. And yeah, I mean I think which authentication method, which like resource management method that people who run a Codex node and kind of like open the API publicly, I think that's like a wide design space, and it's going to be up to different individuals or teams. Like I could see someone building something like Infura but for Codex, and that's going to be like the most common entry point for most people, and then power users or people who need or care about full decentralization are going to be running their own nodes. Yeah. Another question from Zav. Do both Sorry? Username password auth looks a bit centralized. Is it possible to authenticate using Web3 style? And I believe this is in reference to authenticating the Codex API. But if you run the Codex node locally, you don't have to authenticate at all. Another question from Zav. Do both peers need to already be in the room to intercept the Waku message? What happens if the other peer had subscribed to the topic only after the message was sent? If it's only using the filter protocol, then yes, it will miss the message because the filter will only give you messages that get detected after you started. But we also have something called the store protocol. And using store is how you can get the historical messages for a specific content topic. So you can use store to do a time-based query. So let's say the application detects that, okay, you were last online 2 hours ago, and now you have come back online. You've started the filter subscription at timestamp T, so you can reasonably assume like you're going to get every message from T and onwards, and then you make the application will make a time-based store query for everything in the last 2 hours. That's the typical that's one of the typical strategies. I believe something like this is currently implemented in status among other recovery strategies. But yeah, it's a combination of filter and store will give you all the data. And another thing, it's another thing that we're hoping to abstract away behind a unified API where you don't even have to like think about this. It's just you like one function says give me all the messages or make sure I have all the messages, and it'll handle it all and make sure you get all the new messages. Did I send? Yeah, okay, I sent this section. So let's go over the client implementation. So Codex client, either it's already set, if it's not set, or if the setting if the client instance settings don't match uh, the application settings, then it makes a new client instance. And the Codex client itself is a class that abstracts over some necessary configuration that we need to specify an endpoint. So yeah, it looks like this is just like a light wrapper over HTTP requests to the API. Right, so this is the code for the next JS endpoint, which provides a proxy. And yeah, it looks like it's using username and password authentication. But I think that the Codex endpoint is public. I'm not sure where the username and password are coming from, so I'll take a look at that later. File upload, build a new request, track progress, and then post it to the v1 data endpoint. Something like that. When we finish uploading, we get a response and we parse it. I think the most important part is getting the CID and determining whether or not the upload was actually successful. Checking if the node is active, setting up React state, file transfer integration. So I think this is how the UI actually gets the file and passes it over to Codex. Once the upload is complete, we then share the CID over Waku. So the send file message, that file message protobuf type we were looking at earlier, this is where it's used. Error handling, configuration, key implementation notes. Singleton pattern to prevent multiple instances. I believe the Waku client should be doing that too. We have 30-second cache for node status. Switch between local or remote endpoints. Track progress using XML HTTP requests. Multiple response formats, error recovery, type safety. Beautiful. Okay, this looks pretty good to me. I'm still happy with the state that Claude is in and the progress that it's making. So I'll say, I'll give it some praise. Review, excellent job. We are on the right track. Make a no, don't make a commit yet. Review your experience working on this project so far and evaluate evaluate what? And evaluate your efficacy. Leave notes and then make a commit. So if at any point we get a little, if Claude starts to lose the plot, then we'll have this commit with notes that it can use to sort of bootstrap itself again in a fresh context. But hopefully we won't need to do that. Do we want to initialize a Git repository? Sure, why not? It sounds like the right thing to do. The uncomfortable feeling you get when you let an LLM initialize a Git repository on your machine. I love how it like sneaks in advertising into your commits, but I mean, like, hey, I'll be honest, it did most of the work here. Okay, so yeah, it's doing some repo setup, adding a git ignore. I guess that's fine for the reference implementation. Yeah, it's actually that's smart. If for whatever reason we lose the reference implementation, I can just clone it again. And it has it mentioned in its instructions, so hopefully it can detect that, like, if for whatever reason the reference implementation is missing, but you don't need to get too worked up over that. Okay, so now is the hard part. Now is actually taking all these notes and building something clean and workable from scratch. So I'll say, using the knowledge base you have created, start planning the tasks for building a clean, developer-friendly template for React applications that use Waku and Codex. Be strict about adhering to DRY principles. Do not repeat yourself. Use best practices for working with React in a functional manner. That should be fine. Plus kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah. Yeah, I wish it was that easy. I wish it was that easy that you could tell it, like, hey, can you just like make this simple? Can you just make this like really, really nice and really, really good? But unfortunately, that's something you have sometimes you have to like actually be the one to identify and say, hey, this part's way too complex. Simplify it using this or simplify it using that. But I don't know. Maybe you are right. You just maybe I should just drop in kiss with a smiley face and every prompt. I like that Claude Code. Uh, Sometimes you don't even have to ask it to make a plan. So it usually will do these to dos anyways. But I like to be explicit. So we got what, a architecture plan document, core abstractions and interfaces, reusable hooks architecture, configuration environment setup, component library structure, implementation roadmap. That, I mean, that sounds pretty solid to me. I don't know if I could have come up with a better decomposition of this task. Oh, and it made a whole plan. Let's I'll copy this as well for anyone who's interested. Intermediate documents. If you ever ask yourself, what are LLMs actually good for? intermediate documents, which in work and business is most documents. Most documents, I'd say, are intermediate documents, and very few documents are actually final consumer-facing, developer-facing, community-facing documents. And even then, when it comes to, code is sort of this weird, it's like always intermediate and always ready to go, assuming it works, or assuming it works well enough. But in general, intermediate documents, that's what LLMs are great for, and that's how they should be treated, in my humble opinion. That's why I think a lot of startups, a lot of projects trying to capture this AI hype are not going to succeed, because the challenge with intermediary documents is for them to be useful, they need to be contextualized. And in our dynamic world of, I was going to say in software development, but in general, if you're trying to do anything useful, you're probably working with a very, very specific context, and you as the user of the LLM need to be the one who puts in effort to properly contextualize your problems and like what you're trying to accomplish. I think a lot of AI startups are trying to abstract that, to generalize it, to like identify a generalized use case, and then kind of hope that their users are going to be able to properly contextualize it. But I don't think that's the real novelty of LLMs. I think the real power and real novelty is that, this is a new way to do personal computing, and individual personal computers, if you want to call it that, need to be contextualized by the individual. Perhaps some of you have heard the quote from Steve Jobs that the computer is like the bicycle for the mind. And I think a lot of Web 2, I think a lot of the philosophy behind Web 2 and SaaS is, instead of having a bicycle, you have a tricycle, or a bicycle with training wheels that is easier to use but can't really do as much. And they're trying to repeat that same pattern for LLMs, but I think I don't think it's gonna work as well. I mean, maybe it's a good way to raise a bunch of money from VCs if that's your goal, but in the long term, I think it's every individual needs to play and learn and experiment aggressively with these tools and find out for their own unique context of how these can be useful. Because, as these tools get better, it's like you can go look up any SaaS that you might even like, or you go look up a hot new AI SaaS startup. Like, you look up a Chat GPT wrapper or whatever, copy the website, paste it into Cloud Code, and say, hey, make me this, but like free. And soon it'll be able to do it. I mean, right now, like, you can do that. Is just, it's not as simple of a prompt. You have to take some effort, but like I think even now this is a very real possibility. Is you could just you don't want to pay for a SaaS product, just have Claude make it, have it identify the cheapest hosting solution for, the database or any server side components, have it deployed for you, have it tested for you, and then just use that. It's something that before would have taken a lot of work and a lot of effort and may not even have been in people's purviews, but now it's a distinct possibility that individuals and definitely businesses of larger sizes can just start like replacing all their dependencies with their own custom built solutions using LLMs for some cases, not for more like complex and like legitimately uh what would you call them, like legitimately like complex structured products. But it's also why I think infrastructure and DevOps is going to become even more valuable in the coming future, because at the end of the day, like, your code has to run on something, and until Claude can, or any LLM can easily manage infrastructure, which is hard because you're working with like actual machines and physical spaces, until, and you're working with like potentially huge credit card bills and whatnot. Until it can do that, DevOps, I think, is going to become a even more highly sought out after role and skill. I don't know if folks agree or disagree. Claude is working. Um, Knocked out 4 of its tasks. It's got 5 more in the to-do. Let's see what it made. It made a file called constants, bootstrap nodes, network config, content topic, check interval, discovery timeout. Interesting. So it identified that this pure check stuff is something that's not application specific to Guru's app, and it's actually probably useful for any template. That's pretty cool. Building a proto buff protocol. What? What is this abstraction it came up with? Protobuf protocol type with a generic that extends base protocol from types folder. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to ask it to rework this because it's making some assumptions like about ID, name, type, rule. I think these are application specific. And are do not need to be added. Second, let me grab that exact. Here, I guess I can. For this file, type, this file you added a bunch of application specific fields like I forgot the exact name. File name. Or you know what, let's come back to it. I'll let it finish, and then I'll review everything. And in fact, what I'll probably have it do is just try to build the application to make sure that the code it actually wrote can be built. Yeah, it's a good way to make sure that, okay, it's not giving us just like total trash. Even if it looks good, it needs to build. Use async state. Interesting. It's really I don't know if all of these abstractions are useful or not, but guess we'll see. Use service, use async state. Sorry. I wanted to play with the music a little bit. Hey, Chair, do you know if we can customize that song, the Discord stage music? What about right now? Weird, huh? Anyways, it's not a big deal. What do we do we have any announcements to make in the meantime, Chair, while we're waiting for Claude to finish cooking here? Ooh, it's already it itself decided that it should test if the application builds, and now it's going to go and fix these errors. So this is where we got to get a little focused. Sometimes it might decide to do something stupid to try and fix errors. So, for example, it might just try to remove all the code, but I've had pretty okay luck with Claude code. In fact, I'm more worried about it adding things we don't need versus versus removing things. I guess while it's cooking this up, I want to come up with what's a very easy way that we can programmatically check that our code like not only builds and runs but actually does what we wanted to do. So one thing we want to know is, or we want to validate, is that perhaps when we run a example of the template, it should connect to at least one Waku peer, and it should be able to at least query the Codex API and get a real result. I think if we reach that point, then the template is in a good state, and I'd say that this will be a successful vibe coding session. Let's see. Okay, still going through the types. I guess my feedback is that it seems like you tried to write a lot of code at once and are now struggling to make sure it actually works. In the future, please use a tighter feedback loop between adding code and running type check. And then, so that message is queued up. So I believe once it finishes this current tasks or this current execution, it'll process my message, or it might wait till the whole task is finished. I forgot the exact logic behind that. But I didn't interrupt. If I wanted to interrupt, I would have to press escape and then tell it. Okay, yeah, so it looks like it read only after it finished the task. You're absolutely right. God, I love it when in illusion, when a illusion built on top of steroided statistics tells me that I'm absolutely right. I don't care if it's not conscious. I only care about being right. I love when the ghost in my computer tells me that I'm absolutely right. Oh, I see we have Gabriel in the audience. Welcome. How's it going, sir? Oh, I didn't realize you have a classic South Park episode profile picture. All good, sir. Hope you're having a wonderful evening. We're just we're working on a template for Waku, Codex, and React based on Guru's CipherShare application. Yeah, it's no big deal. We're just building the decentralized future one vibe coding session at a time. No, Mom, I don't want to use AWS. I want to use decentralized tech. No, Mom, I want to use the logo stack. Hope we don't get a copyright for this. God damn it, Claude. Work faster, Claude. Ma'am, I need more AI credits. How else am I gonna vibe code? Shut up, Kenny. Shut the fuck up, Kenny. You're not a real vibe coder like me. You're too poor to afford Claude Max.
Alright, I've successfully created a clean, developer-friendly React template for Waku and Codex integration. Oh, fucking sweet. We got service abstraction layer, TypeScript first design. Okay, whatever. Try building it. You don't know. Don't trust anything that Claude ever tells you. Usually after every time it finishes, I'm like, build it or test it or run it, try it. He keeps telling me that it's ready to use. Bro, I don't want to use it. I'm vibe coding. I want you to use it. Okay, so I'm going to go through. Okay, this is the last time I asked it. I gave it feedback. So I'm going to erase the first line because it did not do an excellent job. Say, this was okay, but please make a note regarding a tighter feedback loop between adding code and type checking. When you add too much code without making sure it builds, it can lead to. I don't need to specify. I think that's enough. Your daughter came over my house today and she kicked my AI. And now my AI needs an operation. This would be a perfect moment to get one of those scam calls. Throw it on speaker, stream it live. I've completed the self-evaluation with a specific focus on the development workflow issue. Okay, let's play what? I'm just taking a quick look at what it made in the code editor. It seems okay. I'm not gonna dig too deep. So now what I want to do is have it. Uh, let's make a very basic example to validate our library. This example should be, or rather, you should be able to run this example and check that there is at least one connection to a peer over Waku. So I guess something is important is not just acceptance criteria, but validation criteria. Um, it can be a human in the loop sort of validation. So, for example, like when I was working on a Discord bot,
and the Discord bot had to send a message into Discord, I could very easily check if, it is on the right track if there's a message in the Discord. And if there's not a message in the Discord, or if it sends a message and the bot did it wrong, then I just take a screenshot and I give it back to Claude, and it knows that, okay, something's not working. It's even better when you can have this validation, this acceptance criteria be a programmatic check that it can run. So for example, in this case, we're going to have a example file or an example project that implements the library, and we want it to run and connect to a single Waku peer. So it might be that it might be that we have Claude use Playwright to start a headless browser and open the application we're testing, and then run a test in Playwright and return the value to me, the human in the loop, and then I can look at it and see okay, this looks like an actual Waku peer ID. Even better is if I have a Waku node running and I can somehow check that, oh yeah, we expected a connection or this message from the application we're testing, and we received that message. Anything like that where you as the vibe coder can quickly validate that, okay, we're some very very basic check that we're on the right track. It's super helpful, and it's a good way to make sure that the LLM isn't losing the plot, basically. Servers running, the Vite server, I'm guessing it's just statically hosting the application. I don't know if we set up any, I don't know if it created any server side code. I believe it shouldn't have, but you never know. Interesting. Perhaps I will try this example myself. What was the command? Run example : basic. Yeah, let's see. Okay, so I will actually run it because I want to test it myself. Um, I know I'm not sharing, but here I'll send a quick screenshot of what it showed me. And honestly, this is what I wanted. I sent the screenshot in Discord. Share if you can forward it to all platforms. It did actually
It did actually find it here. I mean, this is... Yeah, I mean, we went from 0 to a very simple template that connects to Waku. So why don't I actually push this repository somewhere? And we can share that. And I'm not gonna commit to, fully maintaining this repository yet, but I think it's so far it's promising. And I do want to, continue iterating on this in future vibe code sessions. Eventually, what I want to do is actually make a Farcaster mini app that lets people try out Waku and Codex, almost like as an interactive advertisement to like show people that, hey, this could be even more decentralized. Because I don't know about you, but I think being sufficiently decentralized sounds like being sufficiently cringe. Guru! Now you join. Ah, he dipped out. He was here for a second. Yeah, little does he know how much he was mentioned in this in this session. Arseni.eth on most platforms. Catch me on.
Web3 liberates internet users, removing third parties from handling data, payments, and communications. Yet the majority of the internet still relies on the centralized infrastructure of Web 2. Companies create data silos of users' personal data, which become the target of millions of cybercrimes daily. Every action on Web 2 can be surveilled. Users' habits, networks, and entire digital lives are collected, leading to poor reputations and a lack of trust in centralized platforms. A fully functioning Web3 requires a trifecta of decentralized consensus, storage, and communications. Waku serves as the communications layer. Waku is a family of peer-to-peer protocols that enable privacy-focused communication for Web3 apps. The protocols are censorship-resistant, modular, and blockchain agnostic. Waku can power various use cases, such as messaging apps, anonymous voting, gaming, marketplaces, Internet of Things, and more. Waku thrives anywhere private data exchange is needed. From resource-restricted environments, like phones and browsers, to resource-rich hardware, as found in data centers. Ready to bring private, secure, censorship-free communication to your application. Visit waku.org.